Hi, I'm Patrick Lawlor from Investec Wealth and Investment, and I'll be chatting to Annabel Bishop, who's the Chief Economist at Investec Bank. Hello, Annabel. Let's start off with talking about the budget speech that we've just had. Annabel, a lot was made before this budget and during the budget as well about the topic of fiscal consolidation. And in this regard, they've targeted deficit reduction to a deficit as a percentage of GDP of 2.4% within 3 years. Is this a reasonable target?
Well, I think certainly having a look at what a budget deficit is, it's the mismatch between revenue and expenditure obviously including expenditure on interest. So they are looking to cut back a little bit on expenditure, they are looking to lift revenue, and I think these are good things, especially looking to cut back on the expenditure on civil servants' salaries and wages. So this compensation budget item is really key to the whole outcome. This is really what fiscal consolidation is all about, trying to live within your means, spending basically what you earn, and certainly we have seen runaway expenditure on civil servant salaries and wages in South Africa, and I think if he does manage to pull it back, and if we do get economic growth in positive territory of at least 2% going forwards, then it could be achievable. There are big asks though, however, and certainly in terms of state-owned entities, parastatals, government departments, there's a lot of inefficiency and wastage that needs to be cut out, and of course the hiring freeze as well also looks like quite good news on this front. But obviously time will tell. This is what's budgeted for. Whether it can actually be implemented is something different.
The growth target that lies behind this deficit reduction plan, do you think it's a reasonable one, or do you think it's overly ambitious?
You know, certainly the reason why we have got such weak economic growth this year and last year, one of the key reasons is the slowdown in the global economy and certainly the global commodity slump. We are obviously a key commodity exporter. So what's really important for South Africa is for the global commodity cycle to lift, for economic growth to lift as well. And in the absence of this improvement in economic demand, we will battle to achieve faster economic growth. Of course, there are internal measures as well, and something which is very key in his budget today was the lack of increase on a material basis in terms of taxes, and particularly in terms of income tax. So for certain, cognizance was taken of the weak state of the consumer in South Africa, and as consumer spending is 2/3 of GDP, this certainly was a sensitive move.
Nonetheless, the plan to freeze employment in the public sector does have an impact over long term in terms of consumer spending, and as does the issue of fiscal drag. We've seen no fiscal drag relief for the high income earners in this budget. Do you not think that's going to have an impact on those growth targets?
Well, I think certainly from the point of view of civil servants, we're not saying we're firing civil servants, we're saying we're just not hiring more. So from that perspective, we're not expecting to see a huge impact on economic demand, and certainly having salaries and wages that are within the means of expenditure for government as well is also very key. In terms of fiscal drag, well really fiscal drag is an adjustment for inflation. As you noted, it's occurring at the lower end where individuals are indeed being compensated, less at the upper end, and indeed some pain needs to be taken in an austerity budget. And while it's not a full austerity budget, there certainly is consideration of what needs to happen. I think certainly in government's 8-point plan with business, they were looking for extreme fiscal consolidation, and he does need to make the cut somewhere, and additionally he does need to obviously create support from an income basis somewhere.
The Minister also discussed a number of tax evasion issues and how they're going to deal with it, such as these hybrid instruments that are used to evade tax. It's also talking about international treaties and bringing more people into the tax net. And on top of that, he's also mentioned another one of these 6-month, shall we call them amnesties, for people to regularize their tax affairs. What's your take on that?
Well, these were actually hallmarks of his previous tenure, and he, was in office from 2009 to 2014 as the Finance Minister. So bringing back some of the items which stood him in good stead previously obviously are to be commended. And certainly, what this budget does indicate is getting the business sector on side with government and working together to try and improve the finances of the country, to try and improve economic growth of the country, but more importantly to try and improve the future for all South Africans. So from this perspective, I think it was a very good budget. I'd actually rate it about 8 out of 10, but I think the bottom line is now, can we obviously deliver?
The Minister said he didn't like the P word, privatisation, even though he seemed to emphasise it in his speech. Nonetheless, he's sort of dipped his toe into the water there. Look at what he's done in terms of consolidating the 4 different airlines into one, SAA, SA Express and others, and maybe bringing in a minority shareholder, and also looking at other issues like the ports and the freight, and bringing in some minority stakeholders there as well. I mean, this is an interesting take. What's your view on that?
I think it's really going to rest on basically how it's done. So the outturn is going to be in terms of who will the partners be. If it is politically collected individuals who go into these relationships, business relationships, in order to garner as much wealth for themselves and their families, if careful checks and balances aren't maintained, if the contracts aren't reviewed, and basically if goods and services are sold for well above their market price, then obviously it's not going to be such a good move. But if it's a proper private sector partnership with government, in other words, you get your best quality businesses involved, businesses that obviously are there to make a profit, but also are there to operate ethically and efficiently and not to waste government's money, then that can obviously be very, very, very worthwhile. So I think, we have seen some deterioration in the quality of relationships in the business sector with government over the past few years, and certainly the review of budget of contracts with government above 10 million rand that Pravin Gordhan's also looking at now is certainly something that's positive in that direction.
Nonetheless, we saw the rand weakening as soon as the speech started. What's your view on that?
I think there's a number of issues. I think obviously one is that it's a very good budget, but it needs to now be implemented. So, people obviously are going to reserve judgment. Another item, certainly a rating downgrade coming through at this period. So that obviously also influenced emerging markets. But key, I think, really in our currency, if you look back over the past 10 to 20 years, the rand has always strengthened on rumour. And you saw the Barclays ABSA deal many years ago, and then when the actual fact comes through into the markets, it actually has a bit of weakness. And that's exactly what happened today. It front-loaded the good news for a good budget. It was delivered, but it's just seeing a little bit of consolidation now.
Thanks for joining us today, Annabel.